And we're live. Hello, friends of the internet. So this is Office Hours. If you've never been a part of Office Hours before, then you're in for hopefully a treat. We will see, I suppose. And let me grab this URL. I ignore chat, so do not ask questions. I mean, feel free to ask questions if you want. I'm not going to pay any attention to them because I do questions in here for various reasons. So if you go down to the description, I'm pretty sure there's still a link to the Office Hours Discord or page where I talk about Office Hours. Yeah, you just go to kentcdawes.com/office hours and that's where you'll find the links to the Zoom as well as the Discord. And that is where I get the questions for Office Hours. So Office Hours is your opportunity to ask any questions. You can even share your screen and we can work through some code or whatever. And that way I can answer all the questions once a week that people ask. And then the rest of the week I can get work done. So happy to answer your questions. I see that we've got some folks here in the Zoom. So any questions from, and I prioritize Zoom. So any questions from folks here in Zoom?
I'm just hanging out for now.
Okay, cool. Renee, you got any questions? You also just hanging out?
Nothing yet. I'm sure I'll think of something.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks.
Okay, cool. Let me see where we left off last week. Oh, yes. By the way, Peter is right. We've got daylight savings, so we're an hour ahead. It's an hour sooner than what people might think. So there you go. But I heard that it's either the Senate or Congress. I can't remember which. I think it was Congress passed a legislation that would end daylight savings in the United States in 2023. So that will be a glorious thing if that ends up passing Senate and gets signed into law. Like that would be amazing. I would love that. Okay, so here's the first question. Jason is asking two separate questions. They don't necessarily go together. What are your thoughts on micro front ends? I work for a startup that currently has one team, but is looking to hire aggressively in the fall. The higher ups think we should start doing micro front ends. I think it's because they see Walmart and Amazon doing it and think we should do it also. I worry it's too much overhead and we're just over engineering. I agree with you. In fact, I'm not even sure that Walmart and Amazon are doing micro front ends. I suppose it's possible, but I don't recall seeing anything about that. One thing that's interesting is when you're using Remix, you do not run into the micro front end problem as rapidly. So let me describe what I mean by that. So first I'd say use Remix or a framework that supports layout nested routing like Remix does. And you can avoid this, a lot of the problems that lead people to micro front ends. So in a micro front ends world, what typically you're trying to solve organizational issues. And so like maybe solve those issues first, but even with those organizational issues, you run into these problems less frequently when you're using Remix, or you can get a lot further before you run into these issues. So in Remix, you've got layout nested routing where this route module is responsible for just this part of the app and that part of the UI. And so typically what happens is you want to have different teams responsible for different parts of the app. And so you'll have a team that's responsible for the shell of the app, and then maybe a team that's responsible for the shell of this part of the app, and then a team that's responsible for this part, and maybe a different team responsible for this part, or maybe you've got teams that are responsible for multiple routes. But that's typically how things are going to be split up for a lot of people, is they split it up on a vertical of different features. That's the most sensible thing in any company that I've worked at. That was the most sensible way to organize the work. I have actually been there are other companies that will split it up by like, here's the front end team and here's the back end team. That works at a small scale, but yeah, when you scale up, that doesn't work very well. Yeah, because like the cohesiveness across the features is challenging. But anyway, so if you split things up on a feature basis, and if those features are on a route basis, then this works out really nicely with Remix. So the problem that you run into without Remix is you've got the team that's responsible for the shell of the app, and they're going to say, okay, well, we need all of the people who are making their pages for all of these routes, they need to use our component and pass certain data to us so that we can render what we need to. And if you need to make any change, then now you've got to update all of the routes that are rendering on every page to send the right data to the shell. And that does not scale very well at all. And so what you typically decide to do is you say, well, I want to be able to render this thing and not have the other routes care anything about this thing that I'm rendering. So there are two approaches to that. You can either do a like have a component that you render that you don't need to pass props to, and that component's just responsible for getting its own data, and that's when you get a waterfall of spinners and everything like that. Or you can do like a micro front end thing where each part of the app is completely isolated from the rest. And they can communicate a little bit, but yeah, not through typical means. And typically you don't want them to anyway. So those are your choices. But when you have nested routing, layout nested routing, you've got the ability for the root to only render the stuff that it's responsible for the shell, as well as getting the data that it's responsible for just like these links and whatever the user is or whatever. And as you make changes, all of your children don't need to worry about the changes that you're making. If you have different data requirements or anything, you can continue to get that data without impacting any of the other user or developers of the app, whether it's sales, invoices, or invoice ID. And that goes up and down through the whole route segments. You don't have to worry about communicating across teams. Like each route can be developed by a single team or a single developer or whatever. And that can be totally vertical as well. So I think that if you use Remix, you will run into the problems that micro front ends were intended to solve a lot less. That said, you can also use micro front ends with Remix. People are experimenting with stuff and have some stuff working. The other big thing that people like to talk about with micro front ends is being able to deploy independently. I don't really think that's something that you need when you're using Remix. You just deploy it if a team wants to deploy today, let them deploy today, and that's fine. And so as long as you keep the what's in the deploy branch, like your main branch, if that's deployable, then you should be able to deploy at any time, and it doesn't matter that you happen to be deploying the whole app. I guess I should have prefaced all of this by saying I've never used micro front ends before. I've never deployed anything with micro front ends, never been in an organization where I felt like micro front ends was the solution to any problems that we had. So I could just be, I could be totally wrong, but this is my impression based on the conversations that I've had with people. And I would absolutely not recommend anybody start with micro front ends if you're using Remix. Remix eliminates a lot of the problems that people have described to me that they're trying to solve with micro front ends. So hopefully
I could jump in on that.
Yeah, sure.
On this topic. So the company that I'm working at, my previous company didn't have any of those scale problems, but the new company has like 50 different teams that are like very isolated from each other. Probably more than that. And each of them might have 2 or 3 apps, and our portal is like a nav app that just loads iframes. And so there's just lots of these iframes all over the place that all used to be Angular. So I guess I'm curious to just kind of nudge you to comment even more on the like outside of Remix. Like I've looked just a little bit into micro front end stuff, and you can do like the module federation, and you can there's frameworks that use iframes. So I don't know, the iframe thing just feels weird to me. Mm-hmm. Like, each one is loading up all of our styles and stuff like all over again,
Yeah. Well, the fact that they're all loading some of the same resources is not an enormous concern, except maybe on the first load, I guess, because that stuff should be cached anyway. But yeah, it's not optimal, and especially if like it's almost all of the same, but not quite the same, so it can't be cached. Then that is a significant problem. Yeah, and iframes in general can be tricky, especially when you want to communicate across them in some way. So yeah, like outside of Remix, I mean, I'm pretty good friends with the maintainers of Single Spa, which is like a really big player in the micro front ends world. And in fact, I just had lunch with one of the maintainers recently, and we talked about this a bit. And so if I were in a situation where I was like, man, I'm really experiencing the problems that micro front end solved, then yeah, sure, I would reach probably for Single Spa first, is what I would look at. If I decided that migrating to Remix was outside of the realm of possibility for me. What we did at PayPal was, of course, like PayPal.com has so many properties. Like there's so many pages on that site, and so we just had teams deploy their own apps and had routing that just would route us to different apps. We weren't able to slice an individual app into a bunch of different teams that could deploy independently or anything. But we didn't really run into that problem, at least not on any of the teams that I was consulting or working on. And so the big problem with deploying completely separate apps is that like, yeah, you can deploy independently, but when the user's navigating between them, they have to do a full page refresh between them. I don't think that's all that bad if provided that your server is fast and can respond quickly to those, especially like when you're going for one of the reasons we don't like full page refresh is because it's not great for accessibility for like focus management and stuff. But typically when you're deploying these separate apps, you're going to a completely different experience. Like I'm on the PayPal homepage and now I'm going to the transfer funds to a friend or whatever page, and then there's not like I need to maintain focus in an input on that transition or anything like that. I'm going to
not shared navigation or anything like that.
Yeah, we oh yeah, actually there was shared navigation, and we did there was a team that was responsible for maintaining the shared navigation, and that was the worst. Yeah, you're right. That was not fun to have to use their thing.
Literally my current project is rewriting that shared navigation app.
Yeah, that was the worst. I hated that. Integrating with their solution, it was not a good solution. So yeah, that's a fair point. And the reason you do that is, of course, is to keep it consistent as you navigate through these different apps. Yeah, and their solution was not great. It wasn't like terribly bad, but yeah, it wasn't awesome. Yeah, Remix sure would have been nice. Man, it would have solved a lot of problems.
I just keep thinking like, okay, if we've got like, every time you go somewhere, you're just loading up a new app in the iframe. Should we just publish our navigation component and everybody consumes it?
Yeah, so the big problem
that could become a maintenance nightmare too. I don't know.
Yeah. So the big problem with a navigation component is if that navigation component needs to behave differently based on the user that's logged in or some other data that it needs to get, how does it get that data from the host app? And how it typically is going to get that data is through props. And then you have a changing requirement, like that data, you need to fetch it from a different API, or you need to, there needs to be additional data. Now you've got a changing requirement. This is the thing that always happens with apps, is we're always changing. And yeah, so when that happens, now all of a sudden you have to communicate to every team that to stay consistent, they need to upgrade your dependency to the next major version and pass the additional data. And so like, yeah, I suppose that works, and eventually everybody will get on to that version. But if you want it to be consistent as you release stuff, now you've got to be responsible for going around and updating all of that stuff. And this is why I say Remix will solve this problem. Because Remix, so what typically ends up happening is, instead of that, you'll say, oh, we have a component, you don't pass us any props, we'll go get the user data ourselves, and so we'll put a loading spinner in there. That's what ends up happening. It's a bad experience. And then all of a sudden you get something like chase.com where you got like 6 spinners all over the place. It's not a good experience. So yeah, maybe outside of outside of having layout routes, you kind of micro front ends do seem attractive. for those kinds of situations where you've got a team that's responsible for the shell navigation, and you don't want to have the problems that I described.
So
Yeah,
whenever
I don't
I hear like a talk from Facebook or something, they'll always introduce our app as a single page application. Like all of Facebook,
Yeah.
like a single react. Is that like, do they mean
No.
that literally?
No, it's not.
I don't have a good concept for what they're actually doing.
Yeah. I mean, you go to, I mean, maybe lots of the pages are within that single page app, but you go to some of the more esoteric stuff, like maybe the settings or stuff like that, terms of service, that is not part of their main app. Absolutely not. And like, you go to, Google, and if you want to go to any of these apps, am I going to do a client side transition to get to that? Nope. Watch the favicon when I click this. Boom, it's spinning. It's a full page refresh. And so like, no, they are not using micro front ends. I don't know about Amazon. I don't know what Amazon's recommendations are going to tell you about me. No, I'm not looking for address. but like if I go to my returns and orders, let's take a look. What does that do? Full page refresh. Yeah, I ordered I ordered some stuff. Luckily, none of this is incriminating. I don't think that I've ordered anything that would be, but you never know. Personal stuff. But yeah, so like even Amazon, like you're getting a full page refresh for that stuff. It's not all that like terribly bad. Like the cost that you have to pay, and this is what Jason said, like worried about over engineering. It's an enormous cost to do micro front ends. It's huge. And I don't think we talk about the cost as much as we talk about the problem. And I think that maybe there's a different way. So I don't know. I realize not everybody can rewrite your apps to Remix today, but if you're in a bad spot and you're like, man, this sure is bad, like deciding to go to micro front ends is just as disruptive as deciding to go to Remix. And so I would weigh that decision against the current options, not just the ones that people have been talking about for the last couple of years. And Remix is an option. So like you can run Angular within a Remix app. Like that's the thing. AngularJS, you can run it within a Remix app. It doesn't have to server render. Your app probably doesn't server render if it's AngularJS. And so like, or if it's Angular even, you could probably figure out a way to make that server render with Remix if you wanted to. So I don't think that you have to say, well, we'd have to rewrite our entire app from framework A to framework to React. That's not necessarily the case. Now, eventually you probably want to, but migrating can be incremental. And I think that Remix is just as an attractive option as micro front ends for solving these problems.
So you might chastise me for how little I know about Remix so
yeah,
far.
No, you don't have to know anything about Remix.
So this may be a really dumb question, but in that scenario, would our entire portal that's now composed of 100 apps be one app, or each one would be written in Remix?
Yeah, well, so you could do it different ways depending on what you want to do. Like the migration story would definitely be, okay, let's take this app and let's make it a Remix app. And then you're full page refreshing to get to that app. And then you slowly just bring more and more stuff in so you don't have to do as many full page refreshes. And so by the end of it, when you're all done, the optimal user experience will be everything is in this one Remix app. That's not necessarily necessary if you're okay doing full page refreshes between them, especially when you're using Remix and it can be really fast. You can even like prefetch resources on the other app if you want to. You could make that work. And so, yeah, like even if you didn't want everything to go in all together at the end of it, you could have individual Remix apps that are just full page refreshing between each other. That's not necessarily a problem. But what's really cool is you can say, hey, we're going to rewrite our portion of the app to Remix. And then this other team over here is like, we're going to rewrite our portion of the app to Remix too. And you just like rewrite different portions of the app And then when you're ready, if you ever decide, hey, let's just all put this together, you literally like drag and drop files into the app directory, and now they're all part of the app. Now, probably it's a little bit more complicated than that because you've got like utils and components and stuff like that. But as far as the routes are concerned, yeah, it should just be a drag and drop sort of experience to combine them. So yeah, I would start with like one of your apps that you feel like is relatively simple, maybe not a big deal if the migration doesn't go well for some reason, or like it's a good place to make all of your mistakes, that sort of thing. Do that one and see how you feel about it. And then you can incrementally bring more stuff into it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. All right, Jason's second question is creating a UI library and a utility function library for internal company use. I use Storybook for the UI library, but I don't know how to show off the utility functions in the same manner. Would you also make a Storybook for the utility function, or is there some other way? Yeah, that's a great question. So let me see if I've still got this. I had a utility library called Genie.js. It actually did have a like a visual piece to that. So there was something that I could actually demo that might have worked in a what's the word I'm looking for, in a Storybook. But there was a lot to it that was like utilities and how you use this thing that doesn't necessarily work from like a UI demo sort of way. So I put together this workshop that allowed you to go through the whole thing. You had like code that you could play around with. You can rerun the code, and you can make changes and stuff. Yeah, and so we'd go through each one of these concepts. This was actually the source for my first talk that I ever gave. I volunteered to speak at a meetup about this library that I had written, and so I built this little in-browser workshop that you could play around with, and I went through that workshop as part of my talk. That was what my talk was. Yeah, it's pretty cool actually. So you could do something like that, like have some sort of step-by-step walkthrough. You can, let's see, yeah, looks like I busted something. Whoops. I mean, this is kind of an older project. Let's see, what else could you do? Yeah, I think like when it's utility functions, it's not intended for, so let's take a step back and think like, why do we make these demos? It's so that we can show what it's like to use. For UI components, what it's like to use has everything to do with the end user. For utility functions, what it's like to use has everything to do with the developer user who's going to be using it. And so I think it makes a lot of sense if you can expose the utility functions in some sort of in-browser editor sort of experience and work through it like that. So hopefully that's helpful to you, Jason. Good luck with that. And no, you don't necessarily need a Storybook for that. You just there are like in-browser editors that you can install and use. So good luck. Cool. I'm probably saying that wrong. Sorry. Context API is resetting child component state. I'm using it as a consumer in one of the components. There are a couple of use state hooks. I'm also saving the value of use state hook in my local storage. So that page, so on page refresh, I can remember the state value. When I hit refresh, the values of local storage are resetting to its initial value. I'm not able to figure out the reason of this issue. This issue is causing some problems while remembering the values of the state. This problem does not exist when I remove the context API. So without like an actual code demo, I can't tell you what's wrong with your code. So you've got to give me a reproduction. But I can tell you what I think is probably the problem is you've got a use effect that's going to update this, the state or yeah, what it sounds like you're doing is you're trying to synchronize state, your use state with context, and you do not want to do that. Do not synchronize state. Derive it. So let's, if we go to the blog, derive, here we go. Whoops, there we go. So you want to derive state. So that's probably what's going on is your context is initializing to a value. You render and you have a use effect that's saying, hey, when the context value changes, set the state, my local state. And so when it renders, the local state is initialized to local storage, but then that initial render triggers that use effect, and it's going to update your use state hook. So don't sync state derive it. So if you want to read that from local storage, have that reading of local storage happen in your use in your context provider. Without actual code, I can't really answer much better than that, but hopefully that helps. Okay, so Logan is asking, oh, thank you for the nice words. I have two Jest React testing library questions, created code sandbox, forked from the official code sandbox to help illustrate the question. I'm going to download this actually, because I do not at all trust code sandbox to run my tests. I know they just barely released like this code sandbox projects thing that is like supposed to be a new awesome thing, but I haven't tried it yet, and I just don't trust it. So we're gonna install it locally. Okay, so how do you test the state of a context value when your render function is simply, provider my counter? State of a context. Okay, so in general, I'll look at the code in a second, but in general, the way that you test this stuff is you think, how does the provider value get into that state? And then you do that in your test. So you make the provider value get into that state. But we'll take a look at it in a second. So the second question is, how can you override the context initial state without adding a just only prop to your React component? Yeah, okay, we can talk about that too. An alternate solution to this one that I thought of is creating an identity function in a util file and then mock it in your test. But the downside is you have to manually mock the context state in each file where you want to override all provider. Okay, so let's take a look at what we've got here. So we've got a counter. This has a counter step provider, and you've got this just only override state so that you can override the value. Yeah, you want to avoid that totally. Use counter is getting some utility functions and stuff for the counter. And then your app is just wrapping the counter step provider and passing on the children. And then you have my counter right here. And so then your index, okay, yeah, it's separate thing. So like ignore all that stuff. Your React context is here. Okay, so it looks like you're just showing me two different examples of this. So the counter is pulling in use counter and counter step provider in my counter, generate component to test against state. So your solution is testing context state in tests. Okay. So yeah, use counter. Yeah. This is kind of like the React use React hooks thing. Yeah, probably wouldn't do it this way. Yeah. You've got a setup test where you render the thing. You have your just override state. You have my counter and state component. Yeah, so this counter state thing, you do not want to do that at all. Don't do that. So let's take a step back. I'm not going to modify this this code because it'd basically be a rewrite. Let me look at this really quick. Yeah, test the component, but not the provider. Okay, yeah, so that way you have to expose the provider, which you don't want to do. Yeah. Okay. So I think I'm going to speak more generally here because this is like clearly it's contrived. But in general, take a step back. Anytime you're testing anything, take a step back. And actually, let me mention to Logan, I am answering this now. Anytime that you want to test anything, take a step back and say, if I had no automated testing tools at all, how would I test this? And the way that you would do this is you'd pull it up in a browser and you'd click around and make sure that it was doing all the things that you wanted it to do. So that's what you do when you're testing stuff is you make your test do the thing that you would do manually. And so your question about how do I, let's see, where is it? So how do you test a state context value when your render function is simply just render the provider and stuff? So you, if that's what your render function is, then you you make your code, you render that thing, and then you make your code do the thing that the user does to get into the state that you want it to be in for the test. And so if you want to say, okay, when I click the, maybe when the user gets to 5 clicks, they can't click any further. So you're going to click on it 5 times with the test, and then you verify that on the 6th time, it doesn't click any further. And maybe if the use case that you had was, well, they have to click 5,000 times. I don't want to do that in my test. Okay, now you got me. Go ahead and mock it with a jest mock. And that's exactly how I do it. I was just put it in a module and mock it out. But it's not very likely that you've got a scenario like that. So yeah, you want to do exactly what the user would do to make the thing happen, and then assert that things are happening the way that that you want it to be. So that is like, as far as like how would you test this thing? If use counter or maybe the app is what you're trying to test, you have maybe you're trying to test the my counter. You're gonna render the my counter within the app component, or even just the counter step provider. You're not going to have a jest only override state. You're simply going to render the my counter within that provider, verify that everything is rendered correctly. You're going to click on the increment, verify that the current count is set properly. Click on the decrement, verify that the decrement or that value is set correctly. Maybe click on the decrement again, and then click on reset and verify that it gets back to its initial state. And that's it. That's what the user would do, and that's what you're going to do. So hopefully that is helpful. Turns out I didn't need to download this after all. Yeah, I hope that helps you. Okay, cool. So next question, Wishin. I'm going to say Wishin. Feel free to correct me. Sorry if I got it wrong. I have maybe silly question regarding the last section of your advanced React patterns workshop. I don't come around this situation. The situation when I click the controlled switch here. Let me pull that up. The state managed by use toggle. It always set to false. Initially, I console log state just below dispatch with on change. Yeah. Okay. I know what your problem is. Probably. Even if I already clicked the uncontrolled switch to be on, click the uncontrolled switch, it seems to reflect the right initial state. Okay, I'm not sure I understand the question. Let's see. I click the controlled switch, the state managed by use toggle is always set to be false initially. If you console log the state just below dispatch with on change on line 40. Well, here's line 40. So if you add a console log of the state right here, yeah, I don't understand the question because the state will not have changed by then. It changes after the dispatch happens, and it won't even happen synchronously there either. It'll happen on the next render. So I'm sorry, if you can join the Zoom call to further explain your question, that would be helpful. Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question. I'm sorry. It's always set to be false. State. So yeah, when it's controlled, the use toggle managed state. So this state will never change in the controlled scenario because we only dispatch if it's not controlled. And so, yeah, this state will always remain the same. The on state will be false always, but it doesn't matter. We don't need to manage that state ourselves because it's being managed for us, and that's what controlled means. And so, yes, this will not change. It'll always remain false, but we are not referencing this state anyway. We are getting the on state from controlled on if on is controlled. Otherwise, we're getting it from our internal state. And so if it's not controlled, then you will observe that this does change. If it is controlled, you will observe it does not change because we do not update it if it's not changed. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay, Matt, I want to ask this question. And today is my birthday. Oh, happy birthday. Let's do party hat. Yay. Yeah, and actually, you know what? I've got happy birthday. There you go. Happy birthday. Okay, Matt. So wanted to ask this question: how to study this project properly? Okay, yeah. Revamped. Yeah. Okay. So such design must involve many architectural decision. Okay, so you already did read the blog post, so that was the first thing that I'd say. Yeah, so your question is more generally, how do you learn an open source project? I've actually answered this before. How to learn an open source project. Can't remember what, yeah, how I learn an open source code base. There you go. So hopefully that helps. I'll stick that there. And also, we want, yeah, the 2020 site. Yep. I'll just stick that here. Also, answering this live on Office Hour here. Office Hours. Yeah, so that blog post is probably most helpful. This one is the one that you referenced. And let's see. Yeah, hopefully that kind of helps. I give you a couple other references there too. As far as like, just a thing I want to mention, just keep in mind when people are looking at my website, they're like, man, is this what it takes to build a website in 2021? Yeah, it is. If you want to build to the scope of what I have, then yeah, there's a lot of technologies involved. But if you're just trying to build your own blog, then do not reference mine, because mine is way more complicated than your blog needs to be. All your blog needs to be is like a bunch of markdown files, and you can render those with you could take the indie stack and just strip all the authentication stuff out of it, render markdown files instead, and stuff. And you should be able to get a blog up and running in like 15 minutes. It does not have to be as complicated as mine is. I did mine as complicated as I did mine because I wanted to teach people how to build websites, modern websites with Remix, and I can't do that if I've never done it before. So that's why I made mine. I scoped mine to be really, really big, is because I wanted to make sure that I knew what I was talking about when I was talking about it. So anyway, hopefully those things are helpful to you. Yeah, good luck learning open source code bases. It's fun. Okay, Kishore, I have an array passed as props to a component, and in that component, I want to run use effect whether the array changes elements. Can I pass directly in use effect dependency array? React shows a warning. Most blogs explain only use string and use effect, but is there any way how it behaves when we pass an array of or objects? Okay, use effect. So yeah, you've got an array as props. Oh man. You want to run use effect whenever the array changes, like individual elements in the array. So I'm going to need an actual code sample of what you're trying to accomplish. It's hard to talk about this in the abstract. But yeah, if you've got an array and you're mutating items in that dependency list or in that array, that is mistake number one. You do not want to mutate stuff when you're using React at all. And in general, mutation as a programming paradigm is not great. It just, not just with React, but with any framework. I know some frameworks seem to really embrace that, but I sure don't like it. That's like AngularJS did that. Vue has their observable thing. I think they've kind of stepped back from that. Svelte super embraces mutation as an API, and I hate that. But some people seem to really like it. So, but for me, you're going to get do not mutate. It makes for really hard to understand code. But yeah, like, oh man, it's super annoying. So the other thing that I guess I'll mention about this, and actually, hold on, something just occurred to me. I need to look at something really quick. This is important. Nope, that is not the app I wanted to open. There it is. Sorry. Nope, I do not want a tutorial on this app that I know how to use. Okay, I think we're good. Yeah, so that first of all, don't mutate the contents of the array. So what you do is you make a copy of the array, set state with that copy, and now you can just add that array object or that array itself into the dependency list. So it's an array within an array. And now whenever you change any item in the array, it's going to trigger a rerun of the use effect. And that may be sufficient for what you're trying to accomplish here. The next problem that people typically run into is, oh, well, now every single time there's a re-render, the use effect runs because the array is brand new every time. And if that's your problem, then your solution is use effect or as use memo. Use memo. And you want to avoid using use memo as much as possible, but sometimes you can't really. So without actual code, I can't give you much more than that. But yeah, good luck with that. Okay.
Hey,
yeah, sure.
just a quick sort of related follow-up to that dilemma. So yeah, the array is coming in through props. So then setting state, initial state based on that prop is what you're sort of saying. It's like, yeah, that's totally fine. And then you mutate the state and everything does what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, not mutate the state, but yeah, change the state. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So if in the parent that array changes, that wouldn't trickle down.
Yeah, so that's another situation of it sounds like you're trying to synchronize state instead of deriving it. So if the parent is if the parent is just passing a value as like the initial value, then this is fine, right? Because it'll never change. It should never change. If that's what it is, then it shouldn't change. But if the parent is maintaining some state of an array and passing that to the child, then the child should just use it as is, or derive some state based on that. And then
parent does something, that prop changes, that re-renders, and then that derived state gets recalc. Cool. That's what I figured.
Yep,
yeah,
you got it. Yep, exactly.
Thanks.
Sure thing. Okay, so Bahanath or Baihanath. I'm gonna go with that. Feel free to correct me. I'm sorry if I got it wrong. I do like saying names correctly, so I will not be offended if you correct me. I'm sorry if I offend you by saying your name wrong. Again, I'm using Remix with Express Apollo server to make GraphQL APIs. My GraphQL API contains a login resolver. The login resolver sets the cookie headers for access token and refresh token. From the Jokes app, what I have understood about doing authentication in Remix is that we have to call the login action function from the login form. In the login action function, we can set the cookie headers for access token and refresh token. But in my case, the login resolver is setting the cookie headers. Does this mean instead of setting the cookie headers from the login resolver, I should return the tokens from the login resolver and use it in the action function to set the cookie? So I'm going to preface this by saying I've never written a GraphQL resolver before. So I don't know if I'm qualified to answer your question. What I would say is do what works. And so if like you do not have to follow the Jokes app at even at all. The authentication strategy that I have in there is just implemented for something that works specifically for the Jokes app. But if you've got something that's working for the for your GraphQL API, then you can stick with that. That's totally fine. So yeah, let me see. Yeah, so I'm guessing that you're going to be calling the login resolver from the action. And so you're just asking, should the login resolver be the one setting the cookie headers, or should it return the tokens and then let the action set the cookie? I don't think it really makes a difference. Yeah, it doesn't really. So if you want to, you can have the login resolver send the response, and then the action just kind of forwards that response along. That's totally fine with me. I don't think it really makes much of a difference from what I understand from your question. So what I would say is implement them both and choose the one you hate the least. Okay, Neon. Is there a way to turn off scroll restoration from the Remix in specific routes, or a workaround for it? I have a modal route, and the background page shown around the modal jumps to the top when the modal is open. So first of all, I'd say modal routes are not always the best as a model, because what happens when you refresh the page? Does the modal animate in? Do you do something like what Twitter does? Or actually, does Twitter do this anymore? No, I've actually forgotten. What? Yeah, okay, got it. Thank you. Yeah, Twitter actually changed the way they do this. They used to have a modal, and then when you refresh, it was no longer a modal, but it was like a server rendered version of the page. But Instagram does.
Instagram has that.
Yeah, Instagram does that. Yep, thank you, Kevin. So anyway, I'm not like a super big fan of route-based modals. They can be useful, but yeah, not always my favorite. But if that's what you have this problem of scroll restoration, and yes, you can disable it for specific routes. And I actually do that on my website. So if you go to the chat, it's the calls podcast. Then down here, if you click on one of these, this is a route transition. Every single one of these is a route transition, but I do an animation. I don't want to bump up to the top because we don't have an individual page for all of those. And so that works out nicely, and I can show you the way I do that here in a second. I also have this on the chats podcast because each one of these is a route transition as well. But I have a problem that I discovered late, and I still need to look into it. And that is if I click on this, oh wait, it worked. Hold on a second. If I click on that, oh, it does bump me up to the top. Maybe there was a bug fix or something. I don't know. That's weird. I was expecting that to have a problem, but I can show you really quick how I accomplish this, and maybe you'll run into a problem and you should be able to solve it. We are planning on doing additional work in the scroll restoration code to give you a little bit more control. But for now, you can disable it on a per route basis, doing what I show you here. I have the should restore scroll, and that conditionally renders the scroll restoration component. And I determine that based on use matches. And I say for every route that is matching currently, does its handle have a restore scroll property? And as long as that's not equal to false, then I will render this scroll restoration. Otherwise, I won't. And so if we go to the chats or the calls in the routes, then I just export this value that says restore scroll false. And that's how I do that. So you can take a look at the code. It's actually like, hopefully it's pretty straightforward. You literally export this handle thing. That's a special conventional export from Remix, is this handle thing. And then you use matches. That'll get you all of the routes that are matching on the current page. And based on that, you decide whether or not to render the scroll restoration thing. We are going to make this easier in the future, but yeah, right now that's something that you can do. So good luck. Okay, is that Rupert? No, that was Renee, I think is who you're asking about. Yeah, no problem. Thank you for kind of saying, well, you're welcome. You mentioned that full page reload can still be found in some websites like Amazon. What is the reason of that? Are they not using React? Probably using Java to serve a web. They use React just deliberately to do a full page reload. No, I don't think that Amazon is using React. And you can see I'm using React. I've got the React Dev Tools right here. Amazon, not using React. Oh, no way. I can't believe it. They are using React. I knew that their video player was React. Holy smokes. I wonder what parts of the page they're using React for. Let's go to components. Where is, come on, isn't it? Oh yeah, so there it is. Aha, it is for their video player. I knew that their video player was React. So that's neat. My question is, are they using React Router? Um, I'm not as good at identifying that as Michael and Ryan, of course. It doesn't look like they are, but that's just, yeah, it's just the one piece there. So that's interesting. I don't think that they're full page reloading because of React. I think they are doing some lower level server rendered framework on the back end. I don't think they're server rendering React at all. Okay, cool. Looks like we've exhausted all the questions. Any questions left in the Zoom call before I wrap up?
Yeah, I was sort of thinking about use effect stuff again. This is one of those like probably doesn't matter either way. But I feel like I've read some advice on this where instead of the dependency array being directly related to the stuff inside use effect, you just sort of go like, hey, whenever this property changes, do this thing. And you just sort of like throw that property in the dependency array. Yeah, is that like totally fine, or is there
that's totally. So the way to think about use effect is the app just rendered, and now the state of my app is out of sync with the state of something outside of my app. And that's the way to think about use effect. And so if there's some value that, when this changes, I need to do this other thing, even if the actual value of this thing doesn't impact that other thing, then that like analytics might be a good example of that. Like you don't care what the value is, you just care that it changed.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, I don't know where I read or heard that was not the intent, but I was like, it seems like it should be.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I know like the linter will complain if you have a value in that array that you're not using.
Oh, does it? I know it complains if you're missing a value, but maybe let's see.
Yeah, I know the missing one, it'll definitely yell at you.
So if we go use effect, let's see.
Don't prove me wrong live.
No, that's okay. Yeah, so it'll complain if you're using a value that it doesn't have. But yeah, it looks like it's fine if you are.
I wonder if I was in a project with extra linting, or I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it's
I
possible.
saw that before.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
cool. Thanks.
Sure thing. Benjamin's got a quick question regarding BlueStack. Is it supposed to happen looking red message? Yeah. Okay. So somebody else has filed an issue on the BlueStack. I'm not sure why this is happening. It should not be. It looks like it's something related to ESBuild. ESBuild is kind of weird. So because it's like a Go binary and stuff. And so I'm not totally surprised that we're seeing stuff like this, but I'm not sure why we're seeing it either. So what's happening though, is if you disable the mock server, this will go away. And the reason for that is because we use ESBuild register to compile on the fly, because we want to write our mocks in TypeScript. So I can actually show you this. So if we look at the BlueStack and we go to where's my PM2 config. So here we, as part of starting up the server, we do a -- require mocks. And if we look in the mocks, we've got an index.js that starts out with an ESBuild register to basically what that does is it hooks into Node's require system. And if any TypeScript files are required, it'll compile those on the fly before sending it to Node to execute. And so that way we can write this file in TypeScript without having to compile it first. And so if you get rid of that line right here, then you will get rid of that warning. And I am not sure how to solve this. This does not happen when I run the dev script. I'm not getting that same error. Also, my Postgres database isn't up, so I'm getting a different error because I can't connect. But I'm not getting that error that you are. So I'm not sure what is going on. But if you can dig into it, then that would be sweet. But yeah, it seems like it's going to be a bit complicated. Okay, let's take a look. Cousin is asking about recommended low-code, no-code web app development tool written in React. I am not in that space at all, so I can't really say. However, I know that somebody is working on a no-code, low-code tool with Remix. And so I will share that with you because it's with Remix, and Remix is cool. It's called webstudio.is. And it is going to be built with Remix. So you can take a look at that. I'm not endorsing it because I've never used it. I don't use low code, no code tools. But yeah, maybe it seems interesting. It's definitely in beta or not even released yet, or in alpha. Yeah, you can try it in alpha. So that's interesting. Yeah, so this is kind of interesting. You can like click on this and align first order. Yeah, flex child layout. This interesting stuff, and then publish it. Wow, that's cool. Yeah, that's kind of neat. Oh man, maybe HTTPS doesn't work. Oh, Vercel. I don't know. There probably some more work to be done, but anyway, it seems kind of interesting. So good luck. Okay, Sumit or Sumit. I've definitely read your name before, and I don't know if I've ever gotten it right before, so feel free to correct me. Notice one thing on Remix. Let's say I have a routes tracks tsx, and then I have a file define tracks index. I had to define action functions in both the files, even though it was just an empty action function in the index for the action function to work. Yeah, so what you're looking for is we need some way to disambiguate between those two, because one of them is the parent layout, and the other one is the index that renders when you're not at any other child. And so the web is just going to post to the current route, but technically both of those routes are the current route. And so to disambiguate between which action function you want to have actually run, you're going to use index, which I don't know where this is documented. Let's see. Probably actions, maybe. No, that's not going to be it. There we go. If you want to post to an index route, use the question index in the action. So I will grab a link to this and share that with you here. Oh, thinking of use callback. It warns of unnecessary dependencies. Is that so? Let's see. That would be news to me, but I don't use callback very much because I use Remix and I don't have to. Haha, just kidding. But only sort of just kidding. Okay, so if I say return user, then yeah, it is saying oh no, we want to say user. Yeah, okay, so it looks like use callback does warn of an unnecessary dependency. So there you go, Daniel, you're validated. It was just a different hook. And I guess in this case, it makes more sense because it doesn't make, well, sort of, I don't know. There may be a use case to not care about that.
Yeah, it would be just giving you a new function that doesn't do anything different.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
but
I
like
can see how
that
wouldn't.
might, mostly I could see a situation where you're like, yeah, but I do want, things to re-render. I've got this peer component I'm passing it to, or I've got this use effect that I'm passing it to, and I want that to re-render or to rerun. I don't know. I could see a situation where you just ignore that warning, but yeah, for the most part, I think that warning makes sense. Okay, it's I as in get, so Summit. Cool. Good to know your name properly. All right, thanks everybody. This has been fun. This is the end of office hours. It's the end of office hours as we know it. Whoops. Oh, now that's interesting. How did that happen? What? I said off. What? This is really weird. That should definitely have given me a 404. What the heck? Okay. That is super weird. I don't know why I'm getting the office hours page with any variation of this. What the freak?
Remix is broken. No one use it.
Yeah, Remix must be busted. I don't know. That's so strange. If anybody wants to look into that, it's probably something. The broken part is actually probably the way that I resolve. The slug right here. So the routes/slug is going to hit any of my content. Where's the content directory? Content pages. So it's going to resolve to one of these. And so the way that I take that slug, get MDX pages in directory. And so here's my content dir, get MDX dir list. I don't know that I feel like, yeah, there's probably a bug somewhere in here. How we go content and download dir list. Yeah, that we're downloading I think I missed something. Yeah. Oh, okay. So no, we're looking in pages. We've got the request. Okay. Options. No. That's not going to be it. No, this is the sitemap. I'm looking at the wrong thing. Okay. I knew it looked kind of funny. Okay. So there's our content directory. Here's our slug, get MDX page. And then this is a cachified thing. So we've got download MDX files. Here's our content directory and there's our slug. And then where is my get fresh value? Okay, so we've got content dir and slug. And this is going to be relative MDX file or directory. So content / and this will be /pages/o. Dir list, we're getting a dir list of the parent directory. Okay, so we're gonna list all of the files in the content pages directory. That's what this dir list will be. And then potentials. Oh, yeah, there it is. If the name, if the name starts with the base name. So what basically we're saying, let's see. Yeah, MDX file or directory. Yeah, okay. So if it starts with content / pages/o, then that is a potential match. And then we're going to get an exact match, and none of them will be the exact match. And so then we're going to find, that makes sense. Now we're going to find that all the potential. So that includes anything that starts with a or like any of these characters. That's interesting. I did not foresee this, obviously. So anything that starts with that, we're going to find any of those that is a directory. And then we're going to download the first MDX file. So we're going to say, if it's an exact match, then it's just going to be the first MDX file for this exact match. Otherwise, it's one of those potentials. Let's see, where's this dir potential come in? That's so interesting. Yeah, I think I need to revisit this because I'm starting to get lost a little bit on why I thought this was ever a good idea. Oh, you know what it is? It's because I wanted to be able to match office hours and not have to type MDX, because office hours MDX actually works. And so I wanted to say, well, if it starts with office hours, then I don't want to have to type out the full MDX. I didn't realize that also meant you don't have to type out the full file name either. And so the fix for this would be if the name is, I'm not going to actually commit this because I actually don't care about this, .mdx or base name. Oh, yeah, and that is what the name is. Or the base name is the name. I think something like that. Or maybe it should just, because base name is not going to include the extension. What is, yeah. So if the base name plus the MDX is the name of the file, or they just exact perfectly, yeah, if they match exactly, that's probably the fix. But I don't care about this enough to push what might break, and I don't want to start my Postgres database to test it. So we're gonna just leave it the way it is. But that's fun. There you go. That is hilarious. I had no idea. But anyway, that's office hours for you. Let's see. I don't think I've got a cancellation. Let me just double check. The 25th, I should be here. So we should do this again next week. Thanks everybody for hanging out. Let me just double check the Discord really quick. We're good. So hope you all have a wonderful Friday.